Yo guys, this is Reinhardt, your favorite Russian talking. And yeah, I did promise you to make a Warlock video, but I still kind of having a feeling that I need to finish up with a Death Knight, some of the PvP talents. And sorry for not making video, it was really hard time for me to find some time. And as you can see, it's like 6 o'clock in the morning right now. So, alright. Alright, so he's gonna change to Ellie, and the first thing we're gonna test out is Cadaverous Pallor. 30% chance when struck a magical spell to be completely absorbed and converted into disease. So I'll tell him, stop attacking at about 50%. So this guy is actually awesome. So thanks, kudos to him for letting me actually test it out. So lightning bolt. As you can see, absorption did happen, but we do get a dot ticks from it as well. So, and the dot ticks up, like, it gets up to 23,000, 24. The highest I've seen Cadaverous Pallor tick us is for roughly around, I would say 60k. So the damage is actually like a redistribution of the damage. So it does make bursting on us a little bit less viable, but still, it's not like it's a huge buff in our survivability. Although it is pretty consistent, because if the mage has a 600,000 crit on us via Glacial Spike or whatever it's called, and we actually redistribute that into the dot and give us the healer to chance to heal us up, it actually, I feel like, will add a lot of survivability. So the biggest thing I want to talk about is first of all Decomposing Aura. So it actually ticks, it says ticks every 5 seconds, but it's not 5 seconds, and as you can tell, it actually ticks relatively fast and built up stacks quite nicely, to the point where yes, the target will lose 20% of their HP. And then yeah, auto attacks have a chance to summon a mini zombie that slowly approaches. So 10 stacks, it's pretty good, because the guy got down to 1.2 million HP. It falls off relatively fast, about 4 or 5 seconds. And got this guy down to 1.2 million, 25,000, down from almost 1.6. So that's actually pretty good aura. Hard stop aura, I do think it's on average is going to be stronger, because just the nature of a decomposing aura, and it can be kited. Now we're gonna test out the damage on the Frost, on the Crypt Fever. So I'm gonna ask him, can you heal yourself? Okay, and the damage is absolutely garbage. 6.5k. Yeah, it's really bad. What I am actually the most excited about is Wandering Plague, and I'll show you in just a moment. But yeah, 6.5k, number tuning has to be done. When you use Outbreak, all enemies within 4 afflicted by a disease take damage, and the duration of the disease on them are refreshed. I mean, this is actually pretty decent, but not the greatest. This thing is amazing. Wandering Plague. The reason why it is amazing, if it actually gets me to pick, is because it actually does a lot of damage. Kind of a faith in Unholy is restored. So let's test it out really quickly. So as you can see, it actually does quite decent damage. It ticks for 48,000, and it ticks up to 8 times, and then it jumps to the next target. Like, it legitimately actually burns targets alive. So it might be a little bit too strong, and it might be nerfed a little bit, I would say, down to maybe like 40k, but the damage is just absolutely unbelievable on a Wandering Plague, and that will actually give us a huge idea of this Rotting Knight and Affliction, kind of a lock in a plate combo. Obviously, damage can be healed through relatively fast, but 48,000 is something that could be actually potentially very scary. Now, the cool talent would be called Reanimation. Now, Reanimation says it's a 5-second cooldown. The zombie slowly walks towards the target and it gets stunned for 3 seconds. The biggest thing about it, don't worry about the cooldown of 5 seconds, because it's not the 5-second cooldown that matters. It's the fact of the matter that it's not a DR stun. It will last 3 seconds. But it does consume a lot of resources. It does consume, on average, about 2 runes. So yeah, that is kind of difficult. But at the same time, if you can, like, potentially and yeah, by the way, it only has 5 HP, so it can be killed relatively fast. But if the target is actually not paying attention, you can actually disrupt quite a bit. And even if it's that, like, if you put on a healer and the healer has to swap the targets to kill the minion and actually waste a global on it, yeah, that will also detriment it. And yes, it is prone to AoE, but I do think that that's actually not a bad talent. Also, the only thing I want to test is that if it DRs actually with Asphyxiate. So let's actually test it out and see if it actually DRs, because it doesn't DR with itself and it's always 3 seconds stun. Oh, 4 fates. And let's test it out. Dude, this elemental is freaking nasty looking, actually. I like it. Alright, so the zombie is slowly crawling and I'm gonna stun him right now. Oh, nope, it does not DR. So yeah, we can actually coordinate in a really, really nice 8-second long stun. All of a sudden, the DK went from no control to actually decent control. However, we do lose a second grip with Asphyxiate, but I do still think that Asphyxiate will be preferably over the second grip. I mean, it's just a 5-second stun over 30 on the 45-second cooldown over 30-second grip. That also, in terms of like it, the second grip from the Abomination is nice, but it requires a lot of babysitting and micromanagement, I feel like. Okay. Let's see. We have 2 zombies. Strangulating. Stunning. As soon as he comes out, there could be another one that actually stuns him. Wow, he couldn't even get a single cast. So yeah, I actually kind of like it a lot. And also, let's talk a little bit about a couple other talents. Let's talk about the Unholy Mutation. Once I get out of combat. So by the way, necrotics are worthless right now. Like, they hit for 8.5 thousand and they do 40,000 absorption. I think like they took basically a tooltip from the Mist of Pandaria and put it out here, because I mean the absorption is 40,000 on a 2 million HP pulse. I mean, like, why would anybody ever want to cast that instead of this Glowing Shadow that hits like for almost twice as much and still does like pretty bad damage, but our dots at least will do a good damage. Basically, the dots do a really, really nice damage with Wandering Plague, and I think that's like most of what we need. Also, our Apocalypse got actually restructured quite a bit, so it blows out, summons a lot of Army of the Dead, and then this army actually applies, you see, reduce healing by 10%, reduces damage dealt by 15%, and I mean it's pretty nasty to having all those debuffs actually running around. So yeah, Apocalypse is actually became less worthless, but 1.5 minute cooldown is relatively long. Also, we got back our Dark Command, meaning we can actually Probably macro it and keep the healers in combat back in the Wrath of the Lich King / Cataclysm days that we did, or actually taunt like Pats. Like it's say if a mage tries to poly us and we taunt the Pat, like back like it was used to be. Last thing I want to test is Unholy Mutation. So Pandemic, well, Pandemic is probably stronger than Cure Fever, but I do think that Wandering Plague is actually a clear winner right now. Because just the damage is really, really, really nice. Okay, and then this guy is kind of worthless. I mean, it's kind of cool that you actually have the snare moving around. So, should should you sacrifice your animation for that? Possibly yes. The reason why is because the zombies take a long time to get to the target. So you practically can hold almost unlimited amount of snares via your dots. As soon as your Whirling Plague finishes, oh my god, wow, it takes forever for the actually, but you can apply the plague again. So the plague on its own do really really nice damage. Like if a plague ticks, if the Whirling Plant ticks, and if it explodes, it actually can potentially do a lot of damage. One heal. Let's see how much damage that does total. Alright, so let's see how much the actual damage does a dot will do. So so I'm gonna get in a melee combo, so he's gonna stop healing. He healed back to full, so with just a melee auto attacks and 2 dots sticking on the target. Yeah, it will chunk about like 400-500k off of them. So that's actually not bad at all, like at all, because I'm really really happy we got our dots back. That's all I can say. So Necrotics is worthless right now. Unholy Mutation is meh. Reanimation is kind of really really cool. I like the concept of that. Hearts of Aura I think is gonna be the biggest winner here, but Decomposing Aura is also pretty strong talent choice. Necrotic Aura is not the greatest, and Dark Simulacrum and Anti-Magic Shell are great. Cadaverous Pallor is also holds its own ground. Here we can probably go for the Reinforce against the casters, and I would probably go for the Gladiator's Medallion. So, with that said, let's take a look here. A couple of other changes. So, the biggest change I want to talk about is Dark Arbiter and how freaking deadly this thing is actually. Then the next thing is we're gonna talk about like this talent here, and I think that's about it. That's all I got for this video. So let's do this. So I'm gonna apply I'm gonna try to get like stack a lot of runic power. So the Dark Arbiter, basically the way it works is the more runic power you spend, the more damage it's gonna start doing. You see that? 139,000 damage. Like it actually is very very deadly if you manage to cast a lot of death coils out. Also it only lasts 15 seconds. That's probably why, because it does so many damage. So that is the thing. Like, remember how I said I didn't really like a gargoyle being on a 40-second duration because it's diluted damage? Well, Dark Arbiter is basically all of us saying stop doing that shit, give us actual cooldown that does a lot of damage. So that's the thing. Personally, I do like the new Soul Reaper giving you 21% haste as well. I feel like it's actually pretty awesome, and the Defile is also really really nice. Still is a nice talent essentially. Soul Reaper, they changed it. Every time you pop the Festering Wound, you get 7% haste. Now, with that said, let's look at the starting tier. We have Infected class moved from here to here, Epidemic moved back onto here. So for single target, Blighted Rune Weapon is probably very, very nice, but also Epidemic is actually, it's kind of a blood boil, basically, within 100 yards. So that's pretty awesome, especially with the Wandering Plague and Outbreak casting. The second thing here is Necrosis. Every time you Death Coil, basically, your next Curse Strike does a lot of damage. And then we have a trait, Artifact Talent trait, where it will do basically, our Death Coil has a significant amount of chance to increase the damage. So this is the max potential of a Scourge Strike, 160k, 86k regularly. And that's including that we get a 50% increased damage buff from the Scourge Strike and from a Death Coil. So it's not too shabby. I mean, but the 50% damage proc is actually RNG. So other than that, the Clawing Shadow really doesn't do that much damage. I mean, 64k is absolutely like, it's nothing per melee strike per global usage. So, but with that said, it's still better than Necrotic Strike. It's a ranged ability, it actually does more damage than Necrotic Strike absorption. So as Unholy Knight, basically our main priorities are going to be about, I would say, Wandering Plague. Just the ability does really, really nice damage. Nothing else does any good damage but Wandering Plague. Wandering Plague is doing a really, really good damage. So yes, facing Unholy Restored, if they would buff up on Necrotic Strike a little bit more, then between Wandering Plague and the Necrotic Strike, we can actually do tons and tons of damage. So, but because Curse Strike hits like a wet noodle, I don't know, I think they nerfed the damage of it, to be honest. Because it used to do like 80,000, 80 to 100,000 just a non-crit damage, but now it's got worse. So, with that said, this ability is really not the greatest. I prefer Clawing Shadows because I'd rather use my runes for Wandering Plagues, for reanimations, and possibly epidemics. So, with that said, like, it just makes more sense. If your Wandering Plague gets on 3 targets, and all of them gets a Virulent Plague on them, then yeah, we can actually spam Epidemic as much as possible. Why the fuck Virulent Plague is not working now? Oh, there you go. Because it wasn't come. Then we can actually spam Epidemics. And see, like, this is actually not a bad damage. It's like almost like a Death Coil range. So Unholy did become a very, very range-centric class. So between ranged Curse Strikes, the Epidemic, and Death Coil, and Wandering Plague, the damage is actually going to be quite nice. And by the way, Epidemic does 50,000 damage, and yes, multiplier-wise, Cloaking Shadow can get up to 160,000 crits that we've seen. In usual case, it will hit for about 80k, approximately, I would say. But Epidemic is a very, very strong ability. It's a very strong, essentially, Blood Bowl. And I see why they nerfed Scourge Strike is because for them to buff the Epidemic for our AoE damage in PvE, they had to nerf Scourge Strike. That's basically what I'm saying. Virulent Plague by itself is actually pretty bad. It's a very, very bad dot still. I'm gonna show you in a sec. But it does explode, which is really pretty decent damage, but I'm not sure. We need to start healing our pet back. So if you can see, it ticks for 13,000 damage. 20,000 crits. Like, what is this damage? It's really, really mediocre-ish. But when we use actually our Wandering Plague, our dots start ticking really, really hard. So if we add a Soul Reaper on top of it, we're gonna get our Mist of Pandaria Death Knight's playstyle back, which I really, really look forward to be honest. And then our rotation is actually gonna become quite difficult because we'll have to manage our dots, reanimation, or necrotics and the scourge strikes at the same time. So then I could see how the complexity is actually got increased and overall class got better.